A pair of famous Georges said, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. And if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be, led like sheep to the slaughter." Freedom of speech is a universal basic right. But what does that mean? Hello, Universal people. It's time for the Basic Brief, where we cover the top stories of the week and provide our commentary each week on Fridays here at the People's Basics, the home of the Universal Basics. This week in our Basic Brief are news stories that are related to censorship. Stories include a boycott being led against Spotify for sponsoring Joe Rogan, several Republican-led states introducing book bans, new voter restriction bills introduced in Arizona and New Hampshire, police in Portland celebrating violence against protesters, a rise in bomb threats being made against HBCUs, and a rise in global protest and suppression of those protests through state violence in countries like Sudan, Kazakhstan, Cuba, and Afghanistan. The People's Basics opposes the state suppressing access to information and the ability to protest in an attempt to whitewash the past and present. We oppose the countrywide subversion of democracy that is currently being led by the Republican Party to make it more difficult to vote and easier to overturn election outcomes that they dislike. However, unlike restrictions on the ability to express oneself that is enforced by the state, private entities have the right to choose who they do and do not want to platform, as the First Amendment only applies to the government. In regard to Spotify's handling of demands from musicians like Neil Young and others to censor Joe Rogan's podcast for misinformation surrounding COVID-19, it is my personal opinion that Spotify took an appropriate response to addressing the concerns surrounding misinformation while not falling down into the rabbit hole of whack-a-mole censorship. Spotify, in response to criticism and more likely in response to its stock values plummeting from this protest, published publicly their platform conduct policies and announced tools that are going to be coming to address making sure that their publishers are aware of the rules of conduct, as well as creating an automatic content advisory warning for any content published related to COVID-19. I believe this is the right approach because rather than engage in censorship tactics to combat misinformation, Spotify has engaged in a bolstering of beneficial information approach. I also want to commend the protesters who are leading efforts to try and hold platforms like Spotify to a higher standard by using their own free speech rights that created the pressure that was needed to adopt these changes. The biggest question that I think still needs to be answered by those wishing to combat misinformation is, why do you think that the institutions that you believe people should be trusting for quality information are being so distrusted? Many people may listen to Joe Rogan, but are not going to be trusting his information as gospel. The problem is that they're not believing the sources of information that you want. Many may simply be appreciating Joe Rogan's format of including an inquisitive, open, long-form dialogue with noteworthy individuals from all over the political spectrum so that they can try and better ascertain the truth for themselves. People being misinformed is often simply a byproduct of trying to figure out the truth through honest conversation that happens to stray into the realm of ignorance rather than a purposeful, malicious misinformation attempt, as many assert. This isn't to say that I personally endorse Joe Rogan. I do have mixed feelings on his character from the limited amount of clips and reporting that I've seen on his platform. However, I don't use that to hold a holistic viewpoint of Joe Rogan as an individual, as I am aware that this is, information being spread by his competitors who are trying to tear him down because he has a larger platform than many of them do combined. I know that this is going to be an effort for him to also have to address some of the stuff that he said in the past that he no longer believes that are still being resurfaced as an argument against his platform. I think that personally, when it comes to the idea of whether or not publishing platforms need to try and correct or even prevent all ignorance that has been relayed upon their platforms, it is not their responsibility. It is, in my opinion, their responsibility to try and have some degree of up-to-date information of quality when it comes to matters that are sensitive for public safety, like COVID-19. I think this is the only reasonable approach that these types of platforms can take, because the definition of what is considered misinformation is going to be an evolving target that is going to constantly evolve as new information on the science comes to light. So, with that, we conclude another episode of The Basic Brief here at The People's Basics. Please make sure that you are subscribed to be notified of our new content. We got new content coming in the form of articles starting next week again on Thursdays. We're going to be having interviews on the platform coming back in March. And we're going to be having a new activity kind of on Twitter called Twitter Spaces that we're going to be doing weekly on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to talk with you all in the community about the universal basic issues that we platform here at The People's Basics. We also want to remind you all to please support our network financially in creating all of this content and networking events by financially contributing to us by becoming a Patreon member today for only $1 a month. Also, if you liked today's video, please make sure that you leave us a like, reply below to let us know what you think about our stance on freedom of speech and the other issues that we covered in this week's Basic Brief, and share this video with your friends on Twitter and on Facebook. Thanks again for watching this week's Basic Brief. Until next time, get active, Universal people.